Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of GeoPod. I'm your host, Dylan Woods. And on today's episode, we're gonna break down and analyze the upcoming, or rather the potential 30-day ceasefire regarding the Ukraine war that's been agreed upon by both President Zelensky of Ukraine, as well as brought forth by President Donald Trump of the United States of America. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna take a look at what this ceasefire constitutes, and then obviously the interests of not just Ukraine and Russia, but also Europe and the United States as well. So the ceasefire proposal as it stands is as follows. For a period of 30 days, a cessation of all military operations and military efforts is required, which means no advances, which means no airstrikes, no artillery strikes, no military campaigns or efforts of any kind. Now, what the Trump administration wishes to accomplish with this ceasefire is to set up the next stage of negotiations, which in turn will lead, or at the very least, move the dialogue further into the direction of a lasting peace, treatment, or solution. So obviously, a ceasefire is something that a lot of actors and a lot of parties within the geopolitical landscape have long called for. Right? This is a war that has been going on for a good couple of years now. Soldiers are dying by the thousands on the field of battle. And by the current status quo, it doesn't seem that this war, at least from a tactical or strategic point of view, is going to end anytime soon. Now, obviously, if you are Ukraine, the victim in this all, the party that has been attacked, its sovereignty has been attacked, and its borders have been attacked, its people have been slaughtered, its cities have been under constant attack ever since February 2022. Obviously, yes, of course, you want this violence to end. You want the war to come to an end. However, you want to have some guarantees as to make sure that something like this never happens again. So for Ukraine, what is incredibly important is that they receive concrete security guarantees that will prove to be sufficient in posing as a proper deterrent towards Russia in the short, mid and long-term future. So whether those security guarantees come in the form of direct US military assistance, like a security pact with the United States of America, continuous military support, the further expansion of its defense industrial base, as well as its military capabilities, that remains to be seen. But in any way or shape, Ukraine wants guarantees. Ukraine wants to improve its security posture to ascertain that this will never happen again, that they will be able to effectively deter Russia for the foreseeable future. So the United States, Europe, let's start with Europe first. So Europe, if you're Europe, you pretty much want the same thing. You want a Ukraine that is resilient. You want a Ukraine that is secure. You want a Ukraine that can fend for itself. Because if Ukraine can fend for itself and can hold off the Russian horde more or less on their own, obviously it will be more beneficial to your own security posture and the threat level that you are confronted with. So if you're Europe, you want to make sure that Russia is deterred, not just for the sake of Ukraine, but also for the sake of European NATO member states. Everyone knows Putin's long-term agenda. Putin wants to reinstall the Russian Empire and expand said borders as deep into Europe as possible. Vladimir Putin wants to make Russia the primary world power again. And the only way in which he can do that is to topple and overthrow the current leading world power, which is the United States, or by extent, Western civilization, the Western world as a whole. So obviously for Europe, it's very important that Russia is deterred, that Ukraine is strong and will have the capabilities, not just now, but also for the foreseeable future, to improve, to expand its defense industrial base and to expand its military capabilities. Now, for the United States of America, especially for the Trump administration, your primary objective here has been quite clear right from the start. You want a deal. You want a deal so you, President Donald Trump in this case, can flaunt towards your liberal opposition that you succeeded where they failed. Look, I successfully mediated a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, something that all of you failed. Didn't think it was possible, yet I succeeded where others failed. So he can further reinforce his points, reinforce the narrative that he so eagerly upholds all the time. And that is that, well, first and foremost, this war would never have started if I was in office, which is, of course, complete nonsense. Secondly, it will make him seem like the effective mediator that he believes himself to be. And it will provide him with the proper political momentum, not just nationally, but also internationally on the geopolitical stage, which is at the end what he wants. He wants to be lauded. He wants to be praised. He wants to take credit for any good developments that occur within the geopolitical landscape, because it will reaffirm his position within his own borders. It will keep the resentment of his voter demographic alive towards their opposition, thereby allowing him to maintain a high level of popularity, which eventually will allow him to govern with the least amount of opposition as possible, let's say, and will set him up to perhaps win the elections again 4 years from now. Here's what Russia wants. Here's what Putin wants. Putin has dismissed the initial ceasefire proposal based on the fact that, for one, he doesn't think Zelensky is a legitimate party to negotiate with. He still doesn't accept or recognize Zelensky's authority as the elected ruler of a sovereign country. He wants his agenda to be fulfilled. He wants his expansionist ambitions to be fulfilled. He wants to topple Ukraine, or at the very least, leave it vulnerable enough so he can easily conquer it with a second wave of violence later on. And if you take a look at some of the counter-proposals and some of the notions that the Russians are entertaining at this point in time, it stands as a testament to this agenda. The Russians speak of Novorussia, New Russia, which is supposedly stretching and encompassing the entirety of southern and eastern Ukraine. Not just the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, but the entirety of southern Ukraine as well, leading all the way to the borders with Moldova. And that brings us to the next phase of Putin's ambitions. As I've said before, Putin in no way or shape is interested in a lasting peace. Ukraine is but the first step in his long-term goal. Through Ukraine, he eventually wants to expand further into Europe, and Moldova has long since been on his list. Ever since a couple years ago, they started meddling within the internal government structures of Moldova. Now, why Moldova, one may ask? Well, Moldova stands as some of the weakest countries within Europe. Its army, I believe, only stands around 6,500 up to 7,000 soldiers strong. So once Russia is in control of a territory that aligns directly with Moldova's eastern borders, from there it can easily expand into Moldova and topple the Moldovan government within a matter of days, or at the very max within weeks. And from there on, obviously, he can further expand into the other elements and the other parts of Ukraine, aligning his territories with the Belarusian borders, further expanding the bloc under Russian influence and control. That's what Putin wants. And every concession that Ukraine and the Western world make in this regard will bring Putin closer to achieving that goal. Trump keeps saying that yes, a deal is in the best interest of Russia, and he is not wrong. Yes, a deal is in the best interest of Russia. They're suffering economically. They're suffering militarily. Here's the problem. Putin is not a pragmatist. He's an ideologist, an idealist. Putin has a purpose, a goal and ambition that is not set, or not confined rather, within the spheres of logic or logical interpretation. He has put it upon himself to reinstall the Russian Empire, to make Russia great again, for lack of better words. Very similar to Trump's rhetoric in many ways. Trump is a pragmatist. He believes that every politician does or should adhere to his style of pragmatism, to his style of efficiency, which mostly encompasses economic balance, return and prosperity. Alas, the world doesn't function in that regard. At least not to the fullest extent. And Putin is not a pragmatist. He's a dreamer. He's an idealist, but a very dangerous one at that. And he will stop at nothing. Not the suffering of its own people. Not his economic decline in order to achieve those goals. And he will scheme, he will plot to the extent that he needs to in order to fulfill those ambitions. So far, he tried to fulfill those ambitions militarily. But based upon Trump's rhetoric in recent weeks, it perhaps allowed him to fulfill his ambitions politically, diplomatically. And it's up to the Trump administration to draw the line as to how far he can go. It's very interesting to see how these developments will develop over the course of the coming days. I believe tomorrow Trump will have a direct phone call with President Putin, so obviously a lot of developments will occur around that time. If anything of interest pops up, I'm sure to treat it on this channel and to discuss it on this channel. For now, thank you very much for listening to this short clip, this short episode. Just to provide you with my analysis as to the current developments within the geopolitical landscape. If you have any questions or comments for me, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below or reach out to me on one of my social media platforms. Once again, I thank you for your time and have a blessed day. Thank you.